Hello and welcome again to TelecomTV. My name is Martin Warwick and we're on tour. We're in Dusseldorf in Germany and we're at the SDN and OpenFlow World Congress. And I'm talking again to a man I've met before and had an enjoyable interview with, Neela Jacques, Executive Director of OpenDaylight. Good to see you, Neela.
Good to see you, Martin.
Look, a year ago we were talking, what a difference a year makes. What do you make of the fantastic expansion that's happened in and around NFE and open source and open standards over the past 12 months?
Right, it's totally amazing actually. Just before we started to talk, I was noticing just around with people how open is everywhere. OpenDaylight specifically is, when we walk around the show, everybody has a placard that says OpenDaylight. Every carrier's presentation is talking about OpenDaylight, has OpenDaylight logo at that core controller element. But really I think, so I can pat myself on the back and say, hey, we've done a great job, but really I think that's something more fundamental. I think a year ago, people were questioning this idea of could we really have an open platform? Or we'd never really seen it, right? So it sounded too good to be true, and naturally I think people were questioning and asking really good questions like, could a bunch of bitter competitors get together and work with each other? Could a bunch of disparate technologies be brought together and brought to interoperate? Could a set of passionate engineers who are sure their way is the right way and would they be able to actually collaborate and turn their badges over? And we've really seen it. So on the vendor side, we've seen people come together. We've seen a couple releases of an SDN platform, and that's been great. On the flip side, we've actually seen a major shift in the carriers, in the end user community, where they have been very clear that they want open, and they've been demanding it. Where a year ago when we were talking about, Etsy had said we would like to see network functions virtualized, and we have a white paper to show for it. Mm-hmm. And the big question was, would they be willing to put their time where their mouth was? Would they just fly around the world and have conversations about the world, or would they actually put their skin in the game and create something? And they have. And we see the open platform for NFE, OPN Fe, having been created. And we're seeing, I had a developer design forum in Santa Clara a couple weeks back, and we saw a whole set of end users, including Margaret Kiosi from AT&T, showing up and engaging as our developers are planning the next couple releases.
So a massive sea change, and as we were talking off camera, as you said, so open is reaching the inflection point, the tipping point. What's going to happen?
I think if a year ago the question was open going to matter? I gave a presentation where I made an analogy that says open could be the organic of the IT industry, but it could also get naturaled. What I mean by that is it's not a whether or not we're going to talk about open. We know we're going to talk about open. The question is open going to stand for something? Is it really going to mean a difference in how people operate? Because as you might know, in the United States, natural can mean anything. Everything's natural. Organic means that you actually do things differently. Doesn't mean that you're perfect, but it means you don't use pesticides, you don't use GMO, you don't use fertilizer. In the same way, as we're looking at open right now, everybody's claiming that they're open. But there's a big difference between people who are building truly on an open source code base, using a large part of that open source code base, are publishing open APIs, and are upstreaming the work that they do, versus people that are taking a little piece of open or taking a piece of their code, throwing it on GitHub, taking a piece of OpenDaylight and building a closed platform around it, or taking something they have, contributing into an open source community, really as a way to say, hey, look, our proprietary platform is open too. And I think that we're moving in the right direction, but it's going to take more work and dedication from end users, from vendors, and from the open community to make sure and fight for the fact that open really does mean something and means different behavior.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because you've already said around the event here, you see the word open absolutely everywhere. And I don't want to say anything as trite as how open is open. We've talked about that before. But right. Where does OpenDaylight fit in this open environment?
That's right. So we always have to go back to what problem we're solving. At the end of the day, for an end user, for a carrier, what they're looking for is to, number one, have interoperable interoperability in the network, but network programmability, right? It's the interoperation of the next generation network that we have. There's a great quote I like. I'm going to quote Chris Wright from Red Hat, who said, you know how you know it's open? If it's not fully open, it's closed. And so I think what open means and where OpenDaylight is OpenDaylight is a code base. It is a community-driven code base that people are building their product on. Since we talked, Brocade has come out, for example, and said we're launching a product 8 weeks after the Helium, this is our second release, is out. We're going to build our product, or we've built our product around OpenDaylight. It's going to be an end-to-end product. The Viata product set that we have is going to integrate with it. We're going to keep this core whole, and we're going to contribute back any changes that we make, any bugs that we find. We've seen people like Ericsson and Sienna come out and say, OpenDaylight is going to be at the core of what we're doing. And we've seen the OPN Fe group as they go in and say, we want a common platform for NFV, saying OpenStack and CloudStack are the two options on one side of it. KVM, Zen, and ESX are on the other. And right now, in terms of what's the controller platform, OpenDaylight is the one most talked about. And so we're a critical piece of functionality to be able to deliver SDN and therefore NFV, because one builds on top of the other. But in most cases, as we talked about in the past, what carriers want is vendor-supported open source. Not pure open source, not go download it and do it. So I want it based on an open platform, but I want the support of a vendor there. I want somebody to call. I want somebody to do the integration and the testing and some of the extra quality work.
I think that also from some of the Tier 1 and Tier 2 operators I've spoken to, they're concerned. They don't want to go back to the world the way it was. They know that things have got to change, and they know that for many of them, particularly the Tier 1s, it's a difficult process because it's moving a supertanker and it takes time and dedication in doing it. But they don't want to be locked in the way they were. They want to be able to pick and choose between vendor, kit, etc., and somehow stitch the whole lot together into a coherent whole that does what they want it to do, not what the vendors think it should do for them.
And that's an important point because, OpenDaylight and open source in general does not guarantee interoperability.
Exactly.
But it can really support it. So it can enable it. But at the end of the day, it is the vendor's choice how they implement and how they wrap the open source component. And some people will do it in a highly open way. It looks like Brocade is going that direction. Extreme Networks is another good example. On the other hand, you've got others who are very much being questioned in how they do it. Outside in the service provider world, for example, you saw VMware come out with an OpenStack distribution. Mm-hmm. You've seen a lot of articles about people saying it seems that really they're doing that to serve their customers who are running on their technology. It feels like it supports lock-in rather than enabling choice. And so some of that comes down to vendors making the right decision, in my view. But I actually think really it comes down to the carriers when they're having a conversation with the vendor. Do they insist on only buying from vendors that take a truly open approach?
We're running out of time. I'll have to stop after a couple of questions, so we could talk for an hour on this. But let's go back to OPN Fe. We mustn't say OpenNFV, we will say OPN Fe, which is what it is. It's a Linux Foundation at the back of it. Where do you think that's going to go? There are so many open things out there. Where do you think OPN Fe is heading?
So I think it's a great question. And I think the first question is, why do we need OPN Fe? As you might know, that group actually looked at how do they go ahead and influence the broader developer community out there. And one obvious thing is they could have come in OpenDaylight, and they could have come in OpenStack. They could have come in both projects. Really what they realized is that what they needed was, in a sense, a reference platform. They wanted an integration effort. There is no one like Cable Labs in the telecommunications industry. Right, Cable Labs performs that for the cable industry. So where I think OPN Fe comes is it starts from the carrier use case, from the end user perspective, and it takes the different technology and says, where is there already existing what I need? Where does it need to be tweaked? And where does there need to be significant rewrite in elements? And so it acts in a sense as a coordination role to bring the interests of the carriers down to actual code and development within the open source projects. Most of the development will happen within OpenDaylight, OpenVSwitch, OpenStack, and that's where it makes sense. But I really view it as a partnership on both sides. And there's a tremendous amount of overlap if you look at the members who are participating in the technical steering committee of OPN Fe and the OpenDaylight project, and it makes sense because it's a lot of the same people. Good vendors are always thinking about what problem am I solving for an end user, for a customer.
Okay, last one. Prognostication time. We've just seen an incredible year.
Yep.
For all knocking around this time next year, what do you think will have changed again? How much further down the road will we be? And is there an end point? Is this a journey without an end?
Right.
Or is there an end point?
So there are a couple ways of looking at that. The first one is from a product perspective. A year ago, there were no products available on an open platform, at least that I can tell. We had 30 controllers and no one was dominant. If we look at today, people are thinking that the majority, or saying the majority of new products coming out are going to be based on open platform, namely the OpenDaylight project. I believe in a year, we will see the realization of what Andrew Lerner at Gartner just talked about. There are now 3 gravitational forces in SDN. There is VMware, there's Cisco, and there's OpenDaylight. And OpenDaylight serves as that gathering place. And so I believe that we will see 10 plus major products all based on OpenDaylight. So that's number one. Number two is as these products come out, you're going to see tremendously more end user involvement in the telco side and in the data center side. And we're already starting to hear that first group of people deploying it in a limited case in production. I think you'll see a lot more production use cases, and that's a key one. The last one I will throw in there is you will see the smaller players start to jump in. They don't have the resources to help develop the core platform. They want a platform that's fully built out, and then they'll innovate. What a core platform does is now building a controller is not the table stakes to play in SDN and NFV. You can just own a network service. You can have a network application, an L4 through 7, and just plug into OpenDaylight. And so I think that we will see an amazing, in tail end of 2015, 2016, an amazing amount of innovation as the small guys are now on a more even playing field with the big guys.
Very, very interesting. We'll see what turns out. Ile Jacques, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Martin.